My name is AD Hughes, and today I'm going to teach you the 16th note strumming technique. If you're new to the channel, please go ahead and hit subscribe. Lots of lessons on this channel. And today's lesson is about the 16th note strumming technique, or the funk strumming technique, which in my opinion is probably the hardest technique to learn on the guitar. Far harder than doing any tapping or sweep or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to briefly explain the theory behind it, and then we'll have a quick look at the technique so you can get on and start learning it. So you may already be familiar with an 8th note strumming pattern, and the theory behind an 8th note strumming pattern is that there are basically 8 notes in the standard bar music. So if you had 4 beats, it would be 2 strums per beat. And the way we would count that is like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay. Now, rhythms that have an 8th note strumming technique tend to be relaxed rhythms, sort of like this sort of country grooves. Great sort of singer-songwriting type stuff. Nice and relaxed. 16th note grooves are different, and we count them differently as well. So in terms of the count for 16th notes is 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and. So either side of the and, you get an extra note. And that changes the strumming direction, because on the 8th notes you had 1 and 2 and, which meant that the and was on an upstroke. Whereas the 16th note, the and falls on a downstroke, 1E and Now the feel is different, so 16th note grooves usually are associated with sort of funk grooves. But they use a lot on other stuff as well, so if you listen to all that sort of Hendrix stuff. There's a lot of 16th note grooves and that kind of thing as well. But it's different, and the feel of it is different. There's a different pulse, and it's not necessarily a tempo thing. It's more about being busy. It's a lot busier, this 16th note framework. And ideally, we need to understand where the pulse is in relation to our strumming direction. But first off, let's have a look at the technique. So if you're used to doing the 8th note strumming stuff, and generally speaking, if you're doing it correctly, your arm will be pretty much straight, and whilst your wrist will be loose, there won't be all that much movement going on. Okay, so it tends to be quite a straight arm technique. It's just a relaxed wrist, and that's really cool. And again, it's not about tempo, ska music and things that use that type of framework. But the wrist tends to be reasonably straight. The arm's straight. With the 16th note strumming technique, we change that. And this is the important thing. So with the 16th note framework, we actually need to hang our wrist. So rather than the wrist being straightish, slightly loose, we really want to relax and hang it. We're completely limp-wristed. And the reason is when we play, we actually throw the hand. We don't actually control any of this with the wrist position. The hand is only really controlling the pick and adding slight nuances. But most is a throw. We're jogging the hand, jogging the wrist, throwing it a lot. So you've got to make this go as loose as you can. And the way to that is to position yourself over the guitar in a certain way, and then of course exercise it. So with the positioning of the guitar, if you've got a big acoustic guitar, this really helps, as you'll probably automatically be in this position. But with more of a flatter electric guitar, you have to come a bit closer. But what we want to do is really pivot the arm on the top of the body of the guitar there, which forces your hand into a hang like this. And that means when you move your arm, the wrist will break, the wrist will automatically move. And that puts you in the right place for all these strumming patterns that involve this 16th note framework. So a very loose wrist position. Now it's important to note at this point that you must not try and control this from your wrist. If you do that, it will go wrong. Okay, so your wrist needs to be completely loose. No tension at all must be in that position. So you don't want to start twisting your wrist and trying to force this kind of thing. It has to be completely loose. This same idea is taken on into other stuff, in kind of smaller motions, especially with picking and stuff. But for the strumming, for the funk, you want to really kind of hang it down. Once you're in that position, make sure you've got a reasonably light grip on your pick. Different picks will help you in certain ways on this. You certainly need a solid pick. You shouldn't do this with a soft pick. If your pick bends as you strike the strings, then you haven't got full control over it. And bear in mind these 16th note grooves are quite busy. You need every fraction of a second you can get, so you can't afford to lose your pick behind your thumb as you're picking. So ensure you've got a nice solid pick. I kind of like these thin solid ones for funk strumming. This is a 1.4 Dunlop Jazz prime tone. It's quite nice. Got a nice sort of grip on the pick, which is nice. But as long as it's not massive and it's solid, that's really the main thing. Definitely don't want a soft pick. If it's really thick, you might find it a bit tricky, but you can still do it. Yeah, make sure it's solid. And what you want to do is you want to hang your wrist over the guitar, and the main sort of way to get a feel for this is to mute everything off with your left hand, so you get this nice percussive sound. And then just work on the right hand, just trying to count along and feel the pulse of these 16th notes. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to mute this left hand, as we are, and with the right hand I'm going to count the 16th note framework and strum on everything. I will put a slight accent on each beat, which means I'll make each beat sound a bit louder. So every time I say a number, it will come out a bit louder. So it goes like this. 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen, 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 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen. And that will give me a real good way of getting a feel for the 16th note groove, which is really important. So not only am I getting a feel for the technique, I'm getting a real feel for the pulse by putting those accents on each beat. If you were to engage a metronome, which is a really good idea, you probably wouldn't do this for the first time you've done this technique, but as soon as you start getting used to the feel, stick on a metronome. And the metronome, of course, is hitting each of those beats. So that the metronome will accompany that slightly harder strum on the 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen, 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen. Make sure you are relieving any tension in your wrist. If you start feeling tension build up, something's going wrong, you need to just make sure you're in a good position. Make sure it's hanging. Make sure you're not trying to force anything again. Mustn't try and force this with the pick. Just let the arm hang and just shake it. Just let it all go. Okay, as loose as you possibly can. What I'm doing here is I'm just literally shaking my wrist. I'm not doing anything particularly technique consciously. It's just the looseness. And all I'm doing is just trying to apply that movement into the strings. It will help if you're strumming the thinner strings. I tend to go in from the sort of 4th or 3rd string downwards. So that's the D or G string onwards. You really don't be doing this stuff on the thicker strings. Generally speaking, when you're strumming anything busy, that will drown out the rest of the harmony, so you'll be working on the thinner strings. It also means when you do a downstroke, there's less tension against the strings. The upstroke, you might get a bit more if you're coming on that thin E string. It push your pick away a little bit. But that aside, we're still just working on the looseness of that strumming. 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen, 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen. To take the technique a bit further, you then want to start introducing your left hand into it. So there I've got everything music. It gives me that lovely percussive sound, which is really important and integral to the funk sort of sound. But what we can do is introduce the chords with the left hand only when we want them to sound. And the rest of the time keep things muted. So for example, if I introduced a chord on each of the beats, I'm going to use let's use an E9 chord because I really like it. I could do something like this. 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen, 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen, 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4 yen, 1 yen, 2 yen, 3 yen, 4. And it allows the game some sort of control over the rhythm with my left hand. And that's really important because the right hand's always going to be moving in any of these grooves. Most of the time it will always be hitting the strings regardless. Sometimes you will go to strums, which means even if you don't need to play a chord, you still make the movement of a strum. But a lot of the time it will always make that kind of sort of percussive, clacky sound. And then I just apply the left hand wherever I want the chords to sound. That sound of the right hand is very much a daka 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 daka. Very percussive and sort of signifies the dynamic of the strings of the da being on the downstroke and a ka being on the upstroke, because we're hitting those thinner strings first on the up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, if you start listening to lots of these grooves, you'll start hearing really common things. So for me, I've always noticed the most common thing I tend to hear is the first beat being strummed and sustained, and then hit again on the of the first beat. So you get That's a really useful one just to get under the belt, because you're hearing a lot of stuff. And any of this stuff, if you listen to music and the certain players you listen to and styles, you will pick up on that kind of thing, and you can learn the kind of generic sounds. So if you're working on just one part of the groove, for instance that one, you could just do that and then do the rest of the groove with the kind of percussive nature. Okay. Funk guitar can go in many different directions. It's a very creative style. You can introduce pop in, you can introduce lots of space, lots of interesting kind of walking lines. There's a lot you can do with it. But first of all, it's getting that feel, that 16th note groove, feeling where the pulse is underneath it, and ensuring there's absolutely no tension going through that wrist or that hand. You know, everything is just thrown by the arm. I always kind of relate it, perhaps a bit out of date now, to Ali G when he used to throw his wrist in the 90s in this show. It's that kind of very loose feeling, as loose as you can possibly get. I will stop the lesson there. Hope that's a nice introduction to the technique. If you have any tips of your own, please do leave them below in the comments. Hit the like, hit the share button. Again, subscribe if you haven't done already. I've been a guitar teacher for over 10 years. I'm passing these tips on for free. It's a bit different, obviously, not having someone in the room who would question certain things, but hopefully I've given you enough of a rounded lesson there to get you going. I will see you soon. Please take care for now, and that's that.